Well, the Supreme Court just wrapped up a historic session. Our panel of attorneys can discuss the implications of the rulings and also take a look at what's next for the High Court. And the ink isn't even dry on that gay marriage ruling, but already several states are trying to avoid issuing the same-sex licenses. Do they have a right to do that by just invoking the religious freedom law? Then, the New Jersey couple who was suing the guy who sold them a house because the house came with a stalker. He calls himself the Watcher, and he says he's looking for young blood. And trust me, this one's creepy. But do the buyers have a case? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and tonight we're going to start with the Supreme Court, and we will look at the stunning session that just ended and what we can look for when the justices come back into town this fall. Now, the justices, as many of you know, ruled in favor of same-sex marriage last Friday, that ruling effectively legalizing it in all 50 states. The justices also upheld a key Obamacare provision also last week on Thursday. Now, if that was overturned, the entire law could have collapsed. And those decisions, of course, showed a big shift to the left, no matter how you look at it. And here's how the Times, for one, explains that shift. The stunning series of liberal decisions delivered by the Supreme Court this term was the product of discipline on the left side of the court and disarray on the right. That's the political part, but let's get into the legal aspect of this, and for that, let's bring in our panel. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct. He was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the entire country. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett, PLLC, and former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And Mark Furnish, professor of Brooklyn Law. He's also argued before the Supreme Court himself. Guys, thank you very much. Interesting week here. First, let me do a little scorecard. I'll start with you, Doug. Did you expect both votes to come down the way they did?
I did. I mean, I think there's a trend in the nation that goes that way, and I expected it, and the Supreme Court rulings were consistent.
Politics is always part of it, Mayo. A lot of people thought it'd be a split. That was part of the reason why the judges organized the docket the way they did. Were you surprised, in effect, it was 2 on the left and 0 on the right?
I was. I thought that, although I thought it could come down that way, I definitely thought that gay marriage would pass, but I thought that there was a chance that the health care bill would not, and I thought that if you really strictly construed the statute, that maybe you would say that it was that it didn't apply anymore to the states that didn't have their own mechanism.
How about you, Mark?
I'm with Mayo. I thought, and I said the last time, that I thought the Obamacare ruling would go the other way and that they would strike the statute down. I'm also with Mayo in that I expected the outcome in the same-sex marriage case. I did not expect Chief Justice Roberts to take either position that he did in either case, and to me, that's the real story of this.
It is, and stay with that, Mark, in terms of who voted the way that they did. 5-4 in terms of the Obamacare ruling and 6-3 for gay marriage. Ed Roberts, again, the swing vote on Obamacare.
It's the other way around.
I'm sorry.
6-3 on the Obamacare and 5-4 on the gay marriage. I think on the gay marriage, it was more or less, in my view, a foregone conclusion that Justice Kennedy would come out the way that he did, and I felt there was a significant possibility that he would write the opinion. I did not think, as I said previously, that Roberts would go the other way, and I especially didn't think that after the Obamacare ruling, when I thought that he would vote with the conservatives to strike it down. And I said on the program last week, after the Obamacare ruling, that this confirms my view that Chief Justice Roberts is, as a Chief Justice, a person who is especially concerned with, A, the court's public perception, and we've all read the articles that it's lower than it ever has been, and 2, his own legacy as Chief Justice. And if he were that concerned about those things, one would think that he would have voted the other way in the same-sex marriage case, and then he takes a decidedly unpopular stance in that case. So what's the lesson here? In these political cases, all bets are really off. These cases are always less about law and more about politics. And I think it tells you something about, it gives you a real window into the Chief Justice's morals and his upbringing. The same-sex marriage thing, this is a deeply held belief that he has, and it's anathema to him. If you read his opinion, he says, well, it may be a very popular outcome, and I may even think it's good policy, and he couches it in the language of states' rights. It should be left for the democratic process, judicial restraint, et cetera, et cetera. I think the subtext is that it's something that he must find very, very difficult to get his hands around morally.
We'll get into later in the program the calendar, Mayo. Affirmative action will be the next major case here, but nonetheless, Mark referenced it, the poll numbers in the court, very low, especially since Bush v. Gore. People have thought this became, in effect, the third political branch of the government here, and that's not healthy for this country. You think if anything this past week, may have reaffirmed some people's beliefs here that regardless of who appointed which judge, and yes, some are liberal, some are conservative, and usually it's the usual suspects, that the court is a living, breathing thing and kind of adapts to times. Look at gay marriage, for crying out loud. You never would have predicted that 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
The courts have done that throughout history. We've had Supreme Court justices who were active KKK members who actually voted in favor of civil rights. So you never really know what you're going to get. But what I will say is that you probably have gained people who have reaffirmed their faith in the court, and at the same time you lost just as many because it's such a polarizing issue in terms of both of these issues. The other thing is that if you look at our government across the board, almost historically low numbers. So the trend is downward in terms of the executive branch, in terms of Congress and the court.
Doug, it was interesting. People, they think of this, the court as just this, 9 people in robes and, distances from society. But Justice Kennedy, and when you read about how his opinions have been shaped by this, going back to his days in Sacramento and the rest, these are human beings shaped by their own human experiences, their friends, I'm sure family members of different members of this court. They've also either come out or dealt with it. It's a living, breathing thing, and you got that through some of the majority and also through some of the dissenting opinions on these cases.
I think that's very important. If you look at a lot of decisions throughout history, the decision comes out a certain way and it's reasoned a certain way, but it gets to a decision that's consistent with what's going on at that time usually. And there's a practical reason for that. If it's not consistent, you have a country that's very unhappy. I mean, that does happen, but these decisions are looking at where we are in the country right now, and they're making it's a practical way of dealing with issues that it's on everybody's mind.
Well, to that point, and I said this last week, the Obamacare decision is remarkable because the Chief Justice comes right out in the majority opinion and practically fairly touts that it's strictly a result-oriented decision. He comes right out and says it's an inartful piece of draftsmanship, and if we invalidate it, there will be a calamitous result, the very death spiral that Congress meant to avoid. So he's coming right out and telling you, I'm doing this strictly to avoid a very, very bad consequence.
And I will want to say, from the political angle of this, the big winners, if they allow themselves to win, will be Republicans, because there's 2 issues they won't have to deal with in the 2016 election. If you look at the trending in terms of gay marriage, right now it's 60-30, those who approve and disapprove, and about 10% on the fence on this one. And the numbers, if there's any metric 6 months from now, let a year from now,
but Rich,
it's going to be the other way.
They're already yelling about gay marriage. They won't accept it.
That I don't understand.
It's
Politically, they won by not having to campaign on an unpopular issue, yet they're still choosing to.
And they're going to campaign on Obamacare too, right? Trying to get it reversed in Congress.
But God forbid that they won the case on Obamacare. All of a sudden, people that maybe even supported Republicans would say, "Time out. I had insurance. Now I don't have insurance. What exactly do I do?"
Right.
They don't have to deal with the untenable thing of trying to figure out what to do with those 20-some-odd million people here.
How to fix it in the interim.
Exactly. Okay. Now, after the Supreme Court issued those seismic decisions, several red states are actually supremely defiant by trying to refuse to go along with the gay marriage ruling. We're going to ask the table whether those states can actually get away with it. And for any of you who thought the final word was the Supreme Court, try telling that to a few states down south. Stay with us.